Hi, and thank you for joining me today for Keys, Contracts, and Coffee. I am your go-to Central Missouri real estate agent. My specialties are Lake of the Ozarks and Fort Leonard Wood, as well as all of the surrounding areas. So I don't know if you were able to see my podcast about docks at the Lake of the Ozarks. If you're interested in lakefront properties, you'll have to go back and watch that one. It is very area specific. This one, however, is not area specific. Today, we're going to talk about the process of buying a house. So this will work for just about any person curious about the process. We won't go into a ton of detail, or at least I'll try not to. I'm going to try to hit the points, just give you a pretty good outline of what to expect. We may do some other videos in the future that goes into detail with each of the steps that are going to be in this outline. So this one, if you're one of those people who have bought houses multiple times in the past, an investor who maybe buys a house a few times a year, you probably don't need this one. You're probably pretty comfortable with the process. However, if you're a first-time home buyer or you buy a house once every 2, 3, 5, 10 years, then this might give you a little bit of a brush up on what to expect. So basically what we're going to talk about are pre-approvals, what they are and why they're so important. We're also going to talk about getting yourself a good real estate agent, why that's important. We're going to talk about, after you have those two things, those are the two most important things, about the home search process, as well as putting in an offer. Then we're going to talk about the inspection, the appraisal, and then closing and getting your keys. So number 1 and 2 are just as important as the other. So we'll start with the pre-approval. The pre-approval comes from a lender. I prefer to use local lenders because they know all the nuances and of the areas that they serve. And when I say local, it can be state. I prefer to have them within 100 miles of each other, but that's not necessary. When you go with the national lenders, there are certain circumstances where a national lender is okay. And if you bring a national lender to me, I'll take it, but I'm going to promise you that there are probably going to be some hiccups along the way, more so than if you had a local lender who understands certain things. So those national lenders, a lot of times, they all work in states that have different laws. They don't understand certain nuances and stuff for the area. And so it causes problems. It's just do it that way. If you can get pre-qualified, pre-approved through a local lender, do so. This is important because when you start looking for a house, if you find the one that you want and you love it, if you don't already have a pre-approval, then you've got to get the pre-approval because it is expected by the listing agent and the seller that you submit an offer with your pre-approval so they know that you are a strong buyer. So if you don't have that pre-approval, let's say you look on a house on Friday or Saturday, lenders aren't open. You have to wait till Monday. And then someone could come in and think that house is just as amazing and perfect for them. And now it's under contract and there's nothing you or your agent can do about it. So get a pre-approval. This is also important because the pre-approval shows you your buying power. You can look up based on your income what you can buy or what you can think about, oh, I can afford $1,000 a month payment, but there's a lot more going into it besides just what your income is. There's debt to income, there's credit score. They put all that together into an algorithm and it pulls out what they will give you for a loan to allow you to buy a property. So you don't want to start looking at $250,000 houses because you know you can make a $250,000 a month payment, well, not a month payment, but a payment for a $250,000 house. And the lender come back and say, no, you only qualify for $180,000 because I promise you, stepping down from a $250,000 house to a $180,000 house, it's a completely different type of property. And you're always going to be wishing and dreaming of that $250,000 house, and nothing is going to make you happy. So get a pre-approval, understand your buying power, be able to make a strong offer, use a local lender. I will put this part on the pre-approval part. This follows through the entire process of purchasing a house. Once you're pre-approved and you have a loan on a house, not a loan on a house, excuse me, a contract on a house, do not spend a ton of money. Do not open new lines of credit. Do not make big, huge purchases because at the end of everything, the lender is going to look at everything as a whole. And if something has changed just enough, it is possible to lose that loan and that financing and lose that house. I've seen it personally at least twice from people doing what they thought was okay. That includes not making any big, huge cash deposits. That's a whole nother algorithm in and of itself, which I'm happy to explain to you, but is too complicated to explain over a podcast. So watch your spending. Talk to your lender before you make big purchases. Talk to your real estate agent. We are here to guide you and help you to make sure you cross that finish line, not to make life hard for you. So that's your pre-approval process. The next most important thing is finding yourself a good agent. Yes, there are people out there who sell and buy houses without an agent. It does happen. Do they go smoothly? Sometimes. Do they always? Of course not. The reason an agent is there isn't because you don't know what you're doing, though sometimes you don't. They're there to support you through the process and protect you through the process. So there are a lot of moving cogs in a buying and selling transaction. And your real estate agent is there to protect you and make sure that nothing is missed, to help you when your emotions get high, because your emotions will get high. I will say if you're buying a house, which this is about buying, so you're probably buying a house, get a buyer's agent. I have had people who've reached out about a listing and they want to talk to the listing agent only. I try very hard not to represent a buyer when I have a listing for multiple reasons. One is because I can't truly represent both parties, because I've already got a contract with my seller, and my job to my seller is to give them the most money possible for their property. I can't then turn around and take your contract and say, yes, I'm going to represent you and give you the best value possible for that property, because now I'm working against both buyer and seller. There are some instances when this can happen, like if there are multiple offers. There's not a whole lot I can recommend when there's a multiple offer, but I definitely can't recommend anything to you if I have both the buyer and the seller. So our goal here is to find you, if you're purchasing, a buyer's agent, and not to use the listing agent, unless you're okay to not be represented. Some people don't want to be represented, and that is fine as well. So the next most important thing, which is equally as important as a pre-approval and a good lender, and because I almost forgot or did forget, make sure that you talk to multiple lenders. I would advise you to talk to multiple agents as well. Get a good agent, get a good buyer's agent. You want someone who is representing you. As a matter of fact, in the state of Missouri, if you go into a home, you have to be represented with the signed contract with the buyer's agent before they can take you into the home in the state of Missouri. This is the way the state of Missouri took the law from the DOJ that passed in August of 2024. Yes, there is a way around it. You can contact every single listing agent and get an appointment with every single listing agent to look at every single house you want to look at. You now have multiple agents. You don't learn to trust them. You don't build a relationship or rapport with them. They are working to get the most money out of their seller. They're not working for you. So the fact that you will not be protected through the process, that's what happens when you get a listing agent. You don't want to pay buyer agent fees. 9 times out of 10, you don't have to. If it happens, that is something you discuss with your buyer agent. A lot of sellers are still opting to go ahead and pay for the buyer's agent. So talk with your buyer's agent, find out what your options are. If a seller is not paying the buyer's agency fee, the buyer's agent can tell you, and you guys can discuss, the options from there. I have not come across that yet. Do a buyer's agent. And yes, I know some people want to talk to the listing agent because, they know everything there is to know about the property. No, they don't. 9 times out of 10, I still have to go back to my sellers to ask questions that buyer's agents are asking me. And then whatever they tell me, I tell the buyer's agent. So the buyer agent doesn't know any less than the listing agent. The listing agent simply markets the property and negotiates on the seller's behalf. The buyer's agent helps you find a good property and negotiates on your behalf to give you the best deal. So you're not getting a better deal going to the listing agent, because if you go to the listing agent, whether they represent you as a dual agent or if you're choosing not to be represented at all and you're just asking them to fill out the paperwork, they're getting paid the same. They're actually getting paid more, because more than likely they're taking the buyer and the seller side of that commission. So you're not saving the seller any money. You're not making your offer any better than if you had a buyer's agent. And then you don't have someone who's representing you. So get a buyer's agent, talk to a buyer's agent, ask them all about it. Yes, you do have to sign a contract. The one thing I will say when you sign a contract, they do list their commission amount. I get paid a commission as a buyer's agent, just like I do as a listing agent. And everything on there, understand, is negotiable, including the amount of time you have to be with that agent. I do my contracts by the day, guys. Not everyone does that. Some do it by 30 days, some do it 2 months, 6 months, even a year. I do not do that unless that's something you specifically ask for. Because in my opinion, if we go out on showings and I decide I don't like you or you don't like me, I don't want to be stuck with you for another 30 days, 6 months, or a year. I would much rather you go find someone that you are comfortable with, that you like, because I don't want to represent someone that doesn't like me, nor do I want to represent someone I don't like. So, not everyone gets along, and that's just something that everyone has to understand. If you have an agent that refuses to do it, the agency contract in a time frame that makes you comfortable, go find another agent. There are plenty of good agents out there that would be willing to do what they need to do to make you comfortable. So that's what I have to say about that. So don't be afraid of the buyer's agency contract. Make sure the expiration date is an expiration date that's comfortable for you, and also make sure that you understand how you can get out of that contract if you don't like the agent. Super important. So get a good buyer's agent. A good buyer's agent can also make sure that you have a good lender. They can recommend good local lenders that they've worked with before. So this is definitely helpful. No agent wants to work with a lender that's difficult to work with, that has bad communication, that isn't good with their clients. So they're not going to recommend someone like that. Now, does it happen? Yeah, there might be some because they've just had a bad day. I don't know. Things happen, but they're not going to knowingly send you to a lender who's no good. So generally, you can trust an agent because they want to make sure that the process is smooth for you, because it's smooth for them as well. So good buyer's agent, get a pre-approval from a lender. Those are the two most important things that you can do in the buying process. So now you've got your pre-approval with your lender and you have a good buyer's agent. So what's the next step? Well, now that we know our buying power, you are going to tell your agent every single thing that you need in a house. Understand, you're never going to find the perfect property. There will be compromises, but they will start sending you properties based on the criteria you give them. So if all of a sudden you start changing and looking at other things and they're not sending you properties that you like, well, you need to make sure you're updating them on the changes. So make sure you're very detailed. You know what you want. If you don't know what you want, your agent can maybe help you. Maybe you look at the all kinds of different kinds until you figure out what you want. But figure out what it is you want and then start looking. Send your agent properties you like. They'll send you properties you like. Then you guys will come up with hopefully a list of properties for you to go tour, whether it's 1, 2, 12. I know, like, I have a lot of out-of-state clients because I work in a military community and I work in a resort community most of the time. I do work in several communities that are also like full-time people, but I have a lot of people who come in from out of state, and some of them can't come in, and they have to do like a sight unseen. And so I do video walkthroughs where I tell them what everything looks like, smells like, sounds like, feels like, because pictures are not worth 1,000 words. Videos, and I guess it would be a monologue of everything I'm seeing and feeling in that place, is worth 1,000 words. And it's still not the same as being in it yourself, but it is super, super helpful. That also allows people who are going to come in to look at it the opportunity to go through the houses first and decide, okay, that one I definitely don't want. It definitely is not as nice as it was in pictures. And you can cross them off your list, making your showings more efficient. Not every agent does this. Not every agent does this well. So talk to your agent, see if this is an option if you're from out of an area. Another reason you want a good buyer's agent. So now you're going to go on your tours. Remember, you have to have that buyer's agency contract signed before an agent can let you into the property. You've got your buyer's agency contract and you're looking at houses and you find the one house. This is the easy part. It will be a whole nother video. It's the contract. There are contingencies. There are things that you're going to put in the offer. You're going to discuss this offer with your agent and you're going to agree on it. And like, they're working for you, remember. So they're going to help you make the best offer possible. Every market is different. There is a best offer in every market. In a buyer's market, I'm not going to say there's necessarily a best offer, but you still don't want to make the seller mad if you really like the house. If you really like the house, it doesn't always mean you're going to give them full price, but you also don't want to tick them off. I don't know if I should say that in a video, but you don't, because you obviously want this house. But anyway, you get the offer, the agent writes it up, you sign it, they send it over to the listing agent, they go over it, and within usually 24 hours, sometimes sooner, if they're going to accept it, if they're rejecting it, or if they're countering it, and you enter into negotiation. So that's pretty much the process of going to look at properties and then putting in an offer. Pretty simple. Once you put an offer in on the property, your contingency timeline for your offer starts. So if you have a house to sell, some of those contingency deadlines are delayed until your house goes under contract, at least in the state of Missouri. You still have to put in your earnest money per the dates. Everything else waits until you get your house under contract. We can talk about all that later. I'm not going to really talk about all the contingencies. That is also another video for another time. But one of the most important steps once you get your house under contract is to get an inspection from a third-party inspector done. You can either research inspectors in that area, or maybe you live in that area, so you've used some that you trust, and so that's who you choose to use. That's fine. Or you can ask your agent to find one for you. Generally, your agent is going to find one that they know, like, and trust, that they've used multiple times, because they know they can communicate with them, they trust their findings, that sort of thing. So an inspection is there to help you understand everything there is to know about the house. They're going to poke and prod every single nook and cranny in that house. They're going to give you items that need to be corrected, they believe, immediately, things that you need to watch, and then the punch list items for you for after you move in. Not everything on the inspection report, first-time homebuyers, needs to be corrected by the seller. So sometimes when you get those reports, I don't think I've ever seen a report less than 35, 40 pages. So they're very detailed. They look into everything, absolutely everything, including cracked tile, scratched paint, all that jazz. So they're very intimidating. Generally, what I tell my people is to look for things that are health and safety related, or that just scare the dickens out of you, that you don't think you can handle yourself. And I always talk through these with my buyers. So one person can handle one thing, and another person's like, well, I don't know what to do with that. This is a process that's individualized for every single person, and that's why you need an agent who's good at communicating, is good at understanding, and can help walk you through it and make you comfortable with the whole situation about the inspections. So the inspection is another point of negotiations, just like deciding on a price is a part of the negotiation. So that you can send an inspection notice to a seller, and then they decide, I'll do it all, I ain't doing none of it, or this is what I will do, and you go back and forth multiple times. You usually have a set time frame when this has to be completed in order to not be out of contract and to move forward. So that is the inspection process. I would recommend, depending on the type of house you have, let's just say there's a house that needs all of this, I would recommend for sure 100% general home inspection, termite inspection, because the state of Missouri is very wet. I would also recommend a septic inspection if there is one, a lagoon inspection if there is one, a well and water test inspection if there is one. There are optional ones. They're all optional. You don't even have to get a home inspection, guys, but I would recommend one highly. They're kind of like your general practitioners. They aren't specialists in any of these areas. They know enough about everything to know whether or not you need to go get a specialist. So they'll mark that on there. They'll tell you if you need to go get a roofer. They'll tell you if you need to go get a foundation specialist, an electrician, blah, 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 HVAC specialist. So definitely a general inspection. Get all these inspections. There are other optional ones like radon inspections if there's a basement. Radon's not prevalent around here. I have seen some of those radon mitigation systems in houses, but not very many of them. So that's a comfort level thing. Do what you want to do, get the inspections you want to get, talk to your agent about the type of inspections you'd like to have, and then go from there. Now, once you've finished with the inspection process, the next process is to order the appraisal. I always recommend ordering the appraisal after the inspections have gone through, because you don't want to pay for an appraisal if things fall apart at the inspection, because they can, and they do, I believe, like 14%, if I remember right, fall through at inspection time. Sometimes that's because people are still shopping and they find a house that's come on the market they like better. When you go under contract, do not keep shopping for houses. Get off Realtor.com, Zillow, all of those. This is your house unless something goes terribly wrong. Stay off of the home sites, okay? This is to help you and everyone else involved. Appraisal. So your lender is going to order your appraisal. If you're a cash buyer and you want an appraisal, you don't have to have one. You have to pay for it yourself. If you're not a cash buyer, you are still paying for it. Sometimes at closing, most lenders now are making you pay it up front. You're looking at between $550 and $1,000 for an appraisal. So be aware of that expense. The lender orders the appraisal goes out there, and they decide, does this house meet the value that is in your contract that you are paying for it? Not every house is being bought for the price that's listed on the internet. There are some exceptions, and it depends on the lender. Some lenders, if you're putting at least 50% down, will not require an appraisal. They'll actually waive it. Like I said, the lender gets to decide this, not you, but you can ask. The other thing is there is a difference between a regular appraisal and an appraisal that's done for a government loan. If it is a government-backed loan, an appraiser who is certified in that type of government loan has to go out. This does not take the place of your third-party inspection. A lot of people think it does. It does not. Your appraiser is not an inspector. They have certain guidelines set forth by that government program that tells them the conditions that are acceptable in the house. So they will look at if you have chipped and peeling paint as they're walking by, if you have cracked windows, if there's flooring missing. They're not going to stick their head and their fingers into every nook and cranny of that house to make sure there's nothing to be concerned about. So if you can't afford an inspection, I get it if you want to use that government appraiser as your inspector, but understand they are not an inspector. They're not going to give you what a third-party inspector will give you. However, back to that government appraiser. If there's a condition in the house that they feel goes against the guidelines the government has set for them, you will get what's called a predication notice of the things that have to be fixed before the house can close. Once in a great while, they will allow it to close after the fact, but then money has to go to the title company in what's called escrow, and then it has to be completed within 60 days or whatever the lender sets forth. So case by case basis, guys. So another reason to have a good agent is because an agent who's been through the process with these government loans can look at things and say, there is a possibility an appraiser is going to call this out. Now, one appraiser may call it out and another one may not. I've had this happen on multiple occasions, but they at least have a good roundabout idea because they've been through this enough to know that there is a possibility there could be predication work. There's also a good possibility that the things that you see that are predication worthy on an appraisal will be called out during the inspection, and maybe you've already negotiated it during the inspection. Who knows? But remember, those predication defects, whatever you want to call them, generally have to be completed before closing. If the seller is not willing to correct those items, or you're not willing to correct those items, the seller doesn't have to, the deal will fall apart. The other purpose of the appraisal, which I think I mentioned earlier, is to see whether or not it meets value. If it doesn't meet value, three things can happen. One is, and this usually happens, not every time, but most of the time, the seller comes down to the appraised value. The second thing which can happen, and it's happened as well too, is the buyer comes up with the difference and they continue going through because the seller won't lower their price. The buyer has the ability to do it, they like the house, whatever. That's the second option. The third option is the whole thing falls apart. So depending on how much you like the house, what kind of money you have, what the seller can do, most of the time houses do meet value, but it does happen every once in a while where they don't. That just is what it is. So we've been through several things. We've been through the inspection. We've been through the appraisal. You've had a bunch of emotions, and you've had a lot of talks with your real estate agent and your lender because sometimes it just feels like, or maybe it was a good, sweet process. The last step is closing. So you've spent your money wisely. You haven't opened any new accounts. The financing is going to go through. Everything's good. So in 4 days, you're going to close. So sometime between the day of closing and 4 days out, you will do what is called a final walkthrough to make sure the condition of the house is the same as it was when you walked through it the first time, that nothing unexpected has happened, that a pipe hasn't burst, blah, blah, blah. Your buyer's agent will walk you through and help you with this. If there's something amiss, you can delay closing until it is fixed. You are allowed to do that. That's what amendments are for. They're really great documents. Sometimes if something happens, you're like, well, it's not that big a deal. I'm not going to delay closing for this. So then you just move on and you deal with it. So those are kind of your options. You can also completely get out of it. I haven't seen that happen very much. I don't think I've seen it happen at all. Usually it's a delay of closing or the buyer just says it's not a big deal, I'll deal with it. So you've done your final walkthrough, now it's the time for closing. A lot of title companies now, because that's what we use in the state of Missouri, can do remote closings or they do in-person closings. So a remote closing, depending on the title company, there are multiple ways they can do a remote closing. Sometimes they can email you the documents, you print them out, you go find a notary. Other ones will send a notary to you with the documents. That's really cool. It does cost extra, but it's a lot less stressful for you. Then they overnight them back and everything's hunky-dory and the lender funds and you get your keys. Now I will say, if something delays the funding, it is perfectly allowable and legal for the seller to not allow you on the premises until it funds. So if you close on a Friday afternoon and funds do not hit the bank account of the seller that Friday afternoon, they can deny you keys and access to the house because it's not truly closed until it's funded. Now, if you know this is a possibility, maybe you and your agent and the seller's agent can work something out allowing you access until such time. But that could mean that you don't get to even move into your home until the following business day, whether it's a Monday or a Tuesday, if Monday's a holiday, whatever. So I would suggest closing on a Friday morning. Better yet, closing on a Thursday morning. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are your best closing days because if crap happens, you still have time before the weekend. I've done a lot of Friday and Monday closings, but sometimes those can be messy. So that's your closing. That's when you get your keys. And then anything that happens after the walkthrough. I like to do the walkthroughs the day of closing, sometimes the day before. I don't like to do them really far out because if something happens between the final walkthrough day and the day you move in, any day after the day you move in, it's your baby. It is not the seller's fault. It is not the seller's agent's fault. It is not the buyer's agent's fault. You own the house. It is now yours. So do understand this. And understand that home ownership is sometimes messy, but home ownership is also the fastest way to build wealth in America, especially for us middle class people. So that is your process. Go get yourself a fantastic agent who knows the area, who understands the nuances. Go get yourself an amazing lender who's going to walk you through the process along with your agent, and go look at some fantastic houses that are within your buying power and enjoy the process. Enjoy the process of knowing that you don't have to do it every year or every 6 months, and go find an amazing home. So until next time, this is Amanda Greenwood with Coffees, Keys, and Contracts. I think I got that backwards, but that's okay. It all means the same thing. And then look forward for a couple more videos coming that goes a little more in depth about the buyer's agency contracts and understanding that, the offer contracts, and things of that nature. And if you have any questions or want to know anything else specific about real estate, let me know and I'll do a video and I'll do my best to help you through it. Thanks, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.